All right, welcome back to ICC with Justin and my wife,
Tarsha.
Hey, Tarsha. And we are doing History of Religion Part 3, Israel Goes to War by Truth Unedited. And we're going to get right to it.
In the last part of my series, I introduced the children of Israel, who escaped captivity from Egypt and followed God to the land he promised their forefathers, Jacob, Isaac, and Abraham. I explained the children of Israel were extremely important in understanding religion, because it is them that introduced monotheism to the world first. The God of Israel commanded them not to partake with the other nations' gods. He made a clear split from the other tribes and nations' deities, declaring himself the one true God.
Real quick, I'm not sure that they were the first monotheistic religion. I just know they were the first ones to serve the true and living God, because there are some other cultures who are monotheistic, but they still serve false gods. Just wanted to point that out.
Moving back into the story, I must make it clear that I worship the God of Israel for many reasons, but definitely because of his proven power he showed to the world time and time again. I said it in part 1, that Israel being so small, it would not have been able to do what they did and make such an impression in the world if their God wasn't the one true God. The next part of the story is all about him proving this to the world, and it's why I'm covering it. I could have easily moved from Moses to King David, but I believe this information is crucial to understand. I'll tell you why. While people deny Jesus and the Israelites, they cannot deny that the land that they say they occupied existed. So learning about the history of the land and its occupants reinforces the truth. So I challenge anyone in denial to cite sources of other groups that claim this entire piece of land during this time period. Second, in order for the Lord to establish his covenant in the world, he needed to make himself known. So he chose his people, who were few in number, and led them to conquer the land and bring other nations in fear of their God, who was different than all the others. This is part of the story you must know, and is found in the book of Joshua and Judges. For those that don't know, aside from the law and prophecy, the Bible, particularly the Old Testament, is very much a history book of the nation that was in a covenant with the one true God. So let's begin. Part 2 of the story ended when Moses guided Israel to the promised land. Now Moses was old, at least 120 years of age, and was not able to cross into the land. Before letting Israel depart from Moses, the Lord told Moses of Israel's future rebellion. He told Moses, "This people will rise up and go whoring after gods of the strangers of the land, and they will forsake me, and break my covenant which I made with them. Then my anger shall be kindled against them in the day, and I will forsake them. And I will hide my face from them, and they shall be devoured, and many evils and troubles shall befall them, so that they will say in that day, Are not these evils come upon us, because our God is not among us? And I will surely hide my face in that day for all the evils which they shall have done, in that they have turned unto other gods." Deuteronomy chapter 31, verses 16 through 18. It's important to...
You know what's crazy? For him to say that to Moses, and for Moses to convey that to the people, and they still do it, is absolutely crazy.
Well, they're stubborn and thick-headed, or they call it what, stuff neck.
Mm-hmm.
So,
like I said in the last part, stupidity has to be supernatural. Like, it's gotta be. It's gotta be supernatural. That's just stupid.
Understand this, because this is a major part of Israel's history, and the Lord foretold it before it even happened. Now, after Moses, Joshua was made the new leader of Israel. He was purposed with leading Israel to the land God promised them and dividing the land up amongst the tribes. Israel was a small group compared to the other nations, but they were conquering all the inhabitants of the land that they were about to occupy. One of the cities was Jericho. The people of Jericho knew Israel was coming. Some of the inhabitants made a deal with Israel in order to protect their families. They told Israel that they knew the Lord had given Israel that land, and that the terror of Israel had frightened the inhabitants of Jericho. They said they heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea to come out of Egypt, and what they did to the Amorites. They were utterly scared of Israel because of the word that had went around about the power of their God. Again, this was important because it showed how the knowledge of Israel and their God spread amongst the other nations. They were all utterly frightened. So in the story of Jericho, they were commanded to march around the city, one time, 6 days straight. But on the seventh day, they were to march around the city 7 times. And the priests will blow trumpets, and all the people will shout, and the walls of Jericho will fall down flat. And fall it did. And they overtook the city. Again.
What's cool about that? They have archaeological evidence that that the walls of Jericho just fell down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they got a YouTuber who does all the Bible archaeology, and he finds it's pretty awesome.
The Lord showing his power. So as they were conquering these lands, the Lord told them to abstain from these nations they conquered accursed things, or they would be cursed and bring a curse upon Israel. But of course, there was a hard-headed Israelite, and he took some of the accursed things. So he brought anger to the Lord. So when Israel sent out 3,000 men against the nation, the men of that nation struck down about 36 men of Israel's and chased the fighters of Israel out of their gates. Israel got shook up from this. Joshua had to consult with the Lord. Joshua said, "Alas, Lord God, why have you brought this people over the Jordan at all to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites, to destroy us? Oh, that we had been content and dwelt on the other side of the Jordan. O Lord, what should I say when Israel turns its back before its enemies? For the Canaanites and all the inhabitants of the land will hear it and surround us and cut off your name from the earth. Then what will you do for your great name?" And the Lord said, "Israel has sinned, and they have also transgressed my covenant, which I've commanded them. For they have even taken some of the accursed things and both stolen and deceived. And they have also put it among their own stuff. Therefore, the children of Israel could not stand before their enemies. Neither will I be with you any more, unless you destroy the accursed from among you. O Israel, you cannot stand before your enemies until you take away the accursed thing from among you. Then it shall be that he who is taken with the accursed thing shall be burned with fire, he and all that he has, because he has transgressed the covenant of the Lord." And
you know what's interesting? He just said you can't stand before your enemies unless you remove the accursed thing from you. That really applies to us today. You really cannot stand before your enemies. I'm talking about spiritual, like the demons that try to torment us. You cannot stand before them until you get rid of the things that are bringing you the curse that's on your life. Like, you have to cut covenants with these things that bring you these curses so you can stand before your enemies. It's cool how that parallel just came to me. Like, they talking about a physical combat, physical war, and they have physical cursed things among them, which causing them to, have the situation that they're in where they're dying now and losing. And we, taking ground in our souls, and we have to get rid of the cursed things in order for us to be able to face our enemies within our soul.
Message! Because he has done a disgraceful thing in Israel. So they found a man who took the accursed thing. They stoned him and burned him. I'm telling you, the Lord does not play around. That's why you want to make sure you are
stoned them and burned them.
The Lord showed the fierceness of his anger.
He said the Lord was
and
not playing
around. After the transgressor
around.
was taken care of, the curse was lifted. And Joshua continued conquest of the land of Canaan and its inhabitants. You can see a summary of Joshua's conquest in Joshua chapter 11, verses 16 through 23. It speaks of the kings he conquered in chapter 12 if you want to go more in depth. Joshua took the land and divided it up according to the division of the 12 tribes. It's also important that you know that from the tribe of Joseph came 2 separate tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim, because of Jacob's blessing in Genesis chapter 48. So the land was still divided into 12 tribes, but Joseph's tribe was split into 2. And the tribe of Levi didn't get an inheritance of land. They were divided up amongst Israel as the priest, which is why the other tribes were commanded to tithe their crops and increase to them. But that's another point. So the Lord gave Israel all the land of which he swore, and not a man of all their enemies stood against them when he was with them. He delivered all their enemies into their hand. So not a word failed of any good thing the Lord had spoken to Israel. All had come to pass. The Lord again reminded Israel of his command to keep and do all that was written in the law of Moses. And there is not to be any mention of the nation's gods, nor serve them, or bow down to them. And he would continue to drive out the rest of the nations, and none of them would be able to stand against them. He said, 1 man shall chase 1,000, because it's him who fights for them. But he warned them, once again, that if they cling to the remnant of those nations and make marriages with them, he will no longer drive those nations out from them, but they will be snares and traps for them. He said, when they transgressed the covenant of the Lord and served other gods, then his anger will be against them. You see, there were many warnings given to Israel. But do you think they listened?
No.
No.
Of course not. The Lord said it would happen. Remember that.
Yeah.
So in the last days of Joshua, Israel still did not complete their conquest of the land that God required of them. Joshua died, and the next generation did not know Joshua, and they were unfaithful to the Lord. The book of Judges tells the history of the different judges that Israel had after the death of Moses and Joshua. You see, the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord and served the Baals. They forsook the Lord God of their fathers, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt. Please note, he repeatedly said this as a reminder to Israel that he freed them out of the land of Egypt. So you should understand that this was a very important act he did. Remember that as Passover comes around, and those of us who say we love him pay that day no thought, but give remembrance to Ishtar and her eggs. I mean Easter, sorry. But getting back to the story. After Joshua, they followed other gods from among the gods of the people who were all around them, and they bowed down to them, and they provoked the Lord to anger. They forsook the Lord and served Baal and Ashtoreth. And the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel.
One comment.
Go ahead.
Why not just observe Passover?
Because people comfortable and content of where they at, and I don't know the other part.
But what I'm saying though is like, okay, you do the research, you find out that Easter comes from where it comes from, and it has roots in these things like that, has relations to those things like that, and to completely avoid being an idolater, you can easily just observe Passover.
Well, I know speaking to other people, they state because that's a great time for family to come over and kids to do the Easter egg hunt.
Yeah, I get all that. Passover is an equal amount of time and opportunity for people to come over and get together with family and actually observe not only the miracle that the Most High did for the children of Israel, but also the death, burial, and resurrection of the Messiah. It actually happened during Passover. It's not like it might have happened during Passover. They're not sure if it happened. No, it actually for sure happened during Passover. So as a Christian or any of those things, as a believer, why not observe Passover? Just in case, separate yourself from paganism. Just in case, right? But that's, I digress.
So he delivered them into the hands of the plunderers who despoiled them, and he sold them into the hands of their enemies all around, so that they could no longer stand before their enemies. Wherever they went out, the hand of the Lord was against them for calamity, as the Lord had said, and as the Lord had sworn to them, and they were greatly distressed. So the Lord raised up judges who delivered them out of the hand of those who plundered them. Yet they would not listen to their judges, but they played the harlot with other gods and bowed down to them. They turned quickly from the way in which their fathers walked and obeying the commandments of the Lord. They didn't do it. And when the Lord raised up judges for them, the Lord was with the judge.
Let me put this up in here real quick while we got a second. But my thing is with the Israelites, people from back then, they seen all these miracles and wonders about how the Father went ahead and like delivered them out of Egypt, out of slavery and stuff, how they were getting like this food that was just falling down from heaven and everything, how they were getting water from anywhere, from out of the rocks, out of the ground, wherever the case it was coming from. Why y'all still over here turning y'all back against the person that was there with y'all from the beginning to worship these idols that clearly can't do nothing? They can't move nothing. They can't talk to you. Like, they can't do anything for you.
They can't defend themselves.
Sure can't. It's just like, I don't know. It's like rebellion to the fullest.
It kind of when Truth and Edda was showing right here how the next generation didn't know Joshua.
It's because of their fathers and stuff.
Well, no, I don't necessarily think it's that per se. It might have something to do with that, but it's interesting because it's like, I think about it in today's time. There are people right now who think that Harriet Tubman wasn't a real person. They think that Harriet Tubman was a story that was made up to encourage enslaved Negroes to want to escape, and that she's some urban legend. There are people right now who will tell you that the Israelites and Jesus didn't exist. The whole Bible is false. But you have archaeological evidence of all these people's names being mentioned. And we have more evidence of Jesus existing than we have of Socrates and Plato and all these people. We have more evidence of the Bible being real than we have of the Epic of Gilgamesh having any kind of relevance. But yet people count that as a historical story, based on ancient Sumerian texts and things like that. Like that, we have all kind of things that kind of like point you in the direction of, hey, these stories in the Bible actually happened because the enemies of these people mentioned them by name. Like when Nick and I was going through the history of religion, not the history of religion, Who's Black in the Bible series, while we were doing that in part 2, we talked about the Assyrians when they were laying siege to Israel, to Judea, and they conquered Lachish, and when he was going to conquer Jerusalem, the king of Syria said, we have the king Hezekiah, of the king of the Judeans, trapped like a caged bird. Mm-hmm. That's not in the Bible. That's in the Assyrians' writings. We have writings from the Babylonians talk about how they conquered Jerusalem. We have writings from all these different people that's not in the Bible talking about this Bible that's supposedly not real or don't exist or whatever. So I think the same thing is happening now, where we have a generation of people who simply say all the history they try to tell us is not real, it's not true. I guarantee you back then they had people who said we was never enslaved in Egypt. I don't believe we ever was enslaved in Egypt. I don't believe we crossed the Red Sea on dry ground. I don't believe that all these things that y'all keep saying happen. You can't prove it. I think that's what was really going on.
I think it was a part of both. A part of, the rebellion people, going against the Father and the commandments to do what they want to do. And whenever the next generation came, they wasn't teaching them or telling them about the miracles and wonders, about how they escaped from out of Egypt, out of the hands of the enemy. Plus, on top of that, some people, they probably also was saying that never happened and stuff. So I think it's a hand of both.
I would argue and say both of those are the same thing. You're rebellious by denying the history that your parents or that your forefathers passed down to you, by denying the history that Moses wrote. You're a rebel in that way, and your excuse to be a rebel is that you being a rebel is you denying it from the jump, and that's just your excuse why you're denying it, thinking that it's not real, even though you're still seeing the evidence of it today. Because a few of y'all go in, conquer an entire nation, entire city of people, and then come back with spoils of war, and then y'all move into that territory. You still seeing those miracles happen right there before you, but you don't think that it's real. That's just rebellion, I believe.
Fathers, again following other gods, serving them and bowing down to them. They never stopped doing what they wanted to do because they had a stubborn way. The Lord was over them again. The Lord told them, I also will no longer drive out before them any of the nations which Joshua left when he died, so that through them I may test Israel, whether they will keep the ways of the Lord, to walk in them as their fathers kept them or not. So the Lord left those nations without driving them out immediately. The nations the Lord left to test Israel by were 5 lords of the Philistines, all the Canaanites, the Sidonians, and some of the Hivites. Some of the judges of Israel were Othniel, Ehud, Gideon, Samson, and Samuel. Gideon, one of the judges, consulted with the Lord and asked him how all this distress happened to them. He wanted to know where all the miracles were his fathers told them about. He asked the Lord, did you bring us up from Egypt? But now have...
See? They're asking those questions as if they need confirmation of their history being true or not.
Mm-hmm.
Taken us and delivered us into the hands of the Midianites? Why? And the Lord told Gideon that he would save Israel out of the hands of the Midianites. So Gideon went and tore down the altar of Baal. As soon as Gideon was dead, that the children of Israel again played the harlot with the Baals and made Baal-berith their god.
What is wrong with them?
Thus, the children of Israel did not remember the Lord again, and they were overtaken. They pleaded to the Lord again, and the Lord told them, go cry out to the gods which you chosen. Mm-hmm. Let them deliver you in your time of distress. but he could no longer endure the misery of Israel. They were his chosen people. It should also be noted that the tribe of Dan exclusively took on idols of other gods and did not remove them. Their history became a little shaky, and not to get ahead of the story in the other parts, when the northern tribes were conquered, the tribe of Dan was done away with from Israel and God's covering. So much so that if you read Revelation chapter 7, when God speaks of sealing his 144,000, 12,000 from each tribe of the tribes of Israel, it should be noted that Dan was not mentioned in these tribes. They took on considerable wickedness, so it was important to highlight. It was said that this tribe went north into what we now know as Europe today. But the main points to walk away with from...
I don't know how true that part is. But what I do know is that, it looks like, or it appears that the tribe of Dan was cut off in a certain kind of way. But I don't think it's like an entire cut off. I think people who are descendants of the tribe of Dan, when we get called back to Israel, will be amalgamated into other tribes, probably Joseph.
This part 3 is that, 1. In conquering their land, God was with Israel and fought their battles. He did this so much of the other nations were desperately frightened by the smaller nation of Israel. Number 2, Joshua led Israel in righteousness, and following him, they were able to get the land of their inheritance, which Joshua divided according to the law of Moses. 3, once Joshua died, they disregarded the covenant of their fathers and worshiped Baal over and over. 4, God sent judges to free them from their enemies' hands. They listened for a while, and then went right back with their wickedness. Number 5, they continuously did this, and the Lord left some of their enemies around them. Number 6, the Lord showed his power to the rest of the world by bringing Israel into their land upon conquering the other inhabitants. Number 7, Israel continuously disobeyed him, served other gods, and brought about distress and dominion by other groups. All this is important to know when trying to understand Israel completely. This history is not normally discussed, but you must understand Israel, and you also must understand the Lord. He does not just lay silent in our wickedness, and there are things he hates. He does not just turn a blind eye when we convene with other gods and their traditions. Make sure all that you do in his name actually comes from him. Many of us say God knows our heart, but that should make us all worried when our heart leads us to worship him against his ways and desires for us. The God of Israel is very powerful and worthy to be praised. So understand him through Israel's successes and failures. In the next part, Israel pleads to be like the rest of the other nations. This being exactly against what God told them he desired for them.
Okay. Man. What do you think? History of Religion Part 3.
I like it.
Yeah. Any thoughts? Any... No? You said everything you had to say while the video was on? Yeah. I think we can learn a lot from Israel, ancient Israel in today's time. And I think there's a lot to be learned. That's why people should be reading and studying the Old Testament. But yeah, to constantly have to go through every single generation of judges and relearn what the last generation had to learn the hard way is pure stupidity. Like I said before, I feel like they had people in there who were full of doubts and naysayers, and they were so in discord among the brethren, trying to question whether the things that their forefathers had told them actually happened and things like that. But yeah, guys, that was History of Religion Part 4 by Truth Unedited, our commentary on it. And next time y'all see us together, it'll be History of Religion Part... I'm sorry, that was History of Religion Part 3. We'll be doing History of Religion Part 4 next time y'all see us together. And that one will be, going deeper into the story about Israel getting a king. And I think that's what we'll get into the book of 1 Samuel, which we actually study in at church, which is pretty cool. So yeah, man, like and subscribe, share with your friends, family, whoever, and we appreciate every viewer. We appreciate your thoughts, your commentaries. We appreciate everything from everybody. But yeah, until next time. Peace.
Shalom, sisters and brothers.
Shalom. Yes, ma'am. Shalom.